our session is on strategic planning. So as you can see, I had a lot of planning happening here. And what we're talking about is next year, but this is more of a high level training around like, what do we need to think about to become more strategic, more effective in the year that's coming up? And by the way, if you're waiting to plan out next year and you're going to do it a day or two before the New Year's, that's too late. It's probably too late at this point, but better late than never. It's not too late. You still have a month, but you need to be ready before the New Year comes in, not right before, but way ahead. And ideally, I recommend a month or two before that you have your specifics around what you're going to focus on every quarter, month, and all that stuff. But we'll talk about it at the high level. What does that mean? It doesn't just include next year, because there's no way for you to actually fully understand what you're going to do next year, next quarter, next month, if you don't understand the bigger picture first. And we've actually just spent within this community the past couple of months on starting with vision, going to strategic goal setting, and then this week we have communicating your vision. So there's a whole process that we've gone through, and each session has been 90 minutes. So I'm gonna try to squeeze everything in this to kind of give you guys high level of like, what do you need to be thinking about to be strategic, to be effective in your day-to-day life, and to focus on things that actually matter to you. So we'll start with, there actually, in terms of strategic planning, there are 3 areas for you to think about. There's vision, there's planning, there's habits. Even though I'm saying strategic planning, but you can't do strategic planning without understanding your vision. And we're talking about your overall life, but the same thing actually applies to your business. It's the same exact process. So in terms of starting with, I'm going to go through some of these things really fast because I've covered these before. Vision, without a vision, nothing happens. Think about it this way. If you see a skyscraper somewhere, if you see a house, if you see a kind of life, if you see a kind of design of any kind, it had to be in somebody's mind. Somebody had to have a basic rudimentary vision of what that thing was for it to come to reality right now. And this is not just like new age stuff I'm talking about. You need to have a picture of what you're creating, that bigger picture of what you're creating. And what we're talking about is your overall life. And there's a lot in that life. So some examples might be as well, what kind of lifestyle are you looking for? Can you picture an ideal version of your lifestyle? What kind of business are you looking for? Or what kind of work are you looking for? And really get to the details and making it more vivid, as in like, how do you picture your day? Like walk through your day. And many of you have done that in this community, walked you through your day. How do you picture your relationships? How do you picture yourself? And if you don't know this stuff, more than likely you're operating on a reactionary system that's given to you. And that's all I would say around this. And part of this, the reason why I want to go high level is because the members, my mastermind members have access to all the vision building process. So you can go in specific areas, and I'll give you guys a challenge around this. You can go through all the training sessions, and I'm giving my course for free to the members in the Conscious Investor group too. So I'm pointing to these areas for you to be aware of. So you don't need to know all the process for you to think about this. I just want you to note it down. What do you need to be thinking about for you to be strategic? So the first one is vision. And then the second one is the planning. So the strategic planning process starts. So the biggest part of it is the vision, and then there's the long-term plan, and then there's a short-term plan, and then it breaks down even more. So overall, it's long-term plan, short-term plan. You don't know your short-term plan unless you're aware of your long-term plan. What I recommend usually is at least 3 to 5 years out is your long-term plan. So when you have a vision, you're thinking about, okay, what do I really want to create 3 to 5 years out in terms of my life, in terms of my business, in terms of where I'm growing towards? What am I thinking about? Really writing down all that stuff can completely change how you do things. And by the way, well over 95% of people will not do this. There's a reason why bigger corporations are so incredibly successful, because they think about every aspect of their business. They will think about the vision, they will break it down further, they will have charts after charts of how their process and planning looks like every quarter, every month, every week. There are reasons why they're so successful. The same thing can be applied to like your personal life. There's no difference between the two. And the other one, so within the planning process, there are 4 categories I want you to think about, and I'm gonna break it down, because a lot of times, especially if you're the one who's, let's say, the breadwinner, if you're the one who's doing most of the work in your household, or maybe you're sharing that with your spouse or partner, but regardless, if you're bringing in the income or you have the business, guess what is going to happen? Your focus is going to be the business. You're going to forget about every other aspect of your life. And you're going to hope that that stuff will be taken care of, but it will not be. And this is where you hear all these horror stories of people who became millionaires, billionaires at the cost of what? Their life, their relationships, their sanity, their health, all the stuff that is important. That's why there are 4 categories I want you to think about as you're planning. And that's your growth, your relationships, your professional life, and your contributions. Those categories are really, really important. And the reason why growth is on top of it, and this is why you're here, is that how are you growing personally? And usually we assume that because we're getting older, we're growing. That's not the case. Like you're physically changing, but that doesn't mean that's growth. Personally, are you growing as a human being? Are you becoming wiser? Are you becoming more intelligent? Are you learning new things that applies to the path that you're on? Are you emotionally growing? Are you reactive in your environment? Are you processing your emotions in a better way? How are you reacting to other people's emotions? Are you spiritually growing? And spiritually might mean different things to different people. That might be your faith, that might be your connection to yourself or to nature, however you look at it, but that's a big part of your growth. And then there's your mental growth, which some people connect it to emotional or psychological, but mental might be your ability to focus, your ability to do things, sustain that focus for a long period of time. And I want you to really think about it as like, are you consistently thinking about these areas, your growth, your relationships, professional life, contribution? So when you're actually sitting down, and my challenge would be is as you're writing down these categories, really get your coffee, get your wine, whatever you want to do, preferably coffee. Maybe if wine doesn't make you completely sleepy, really sit down for a day or half a day or a couple hours, start with at least a couple hours, and really start thinking about these areas. What's my vision? Really take a couple of hours to write it down. What kind of life am I trying to create? Who am I becoming in the process? Then the long-term, short-term process, and another couple of hours working through all that stuff. What is my long-term 3 to 5 years out? So as an example, Flint shared this, he was talking about leaving his job. The reason why he knows to leave that job is because he understands his long-term vision, and he had to work through that. Same thing with any of you who if you don't understand that long-term picture, you won't know what to do right now. So really taking the time to put down that long-term process. What are you going to do this year? What are you going to do next year? What are you going to do the third year? So if you have a W-2 job, for example, you need to understand that you need to put a date. I don't care if that's 2 years out, but you need to put a date. And usually you find that there's an emotional reaction to that date that we usually have. Like, oh shit, I'm going to leave this thing. Or if you're looking at your business, let's say you're at 6-figure, you want to get to 7-figure. Okay, this is when I'm going to get to that. And so beyond that, the third one that I talked about was habits. So this is in your day-to-day life. This is really important. If there's anything, like once you figure out the bigger picture, once you sit down for a couple hours, figure out your vision, once you figure out your long-term planning process and short-term planning process, then everything comes down to habits. What does your life look like at the micro level? When you're waking up in the morning, what's happening? And this is where I'll kind of give a few caveats here for you guys, because a lot of people here might have read The Miracle Morning or some kind of habit book or something like that, and they give you this structure around it. That's a general guideline. does not mean that that will work for you exactly as it said. It might work for a little while, but it might break down after a while. What we're talking about is, what are you going to do consistently over the long term without burning out? And that's actually the definition of high performer and the kind of coaching that, what can you do consistently over the long term without burning out and without sacrificing the things that matter to you? So this is a long game. This is not a short game. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. If you're building a sustainable business, for example, if you're creating a life that matters to you, this requires quite a bit of planning, effort, and thinking, and all that stuff. So that's where habits come in. And some examples of habits I want to give you is that habits are not always what I do. It's actually how you think as well. So do you actually have the time to step back from the day-to-day rut that you have every day, jumping from one meeting to the next one, going to your work, to really pause and think? Whether that's in the morning, that's once a week, or that's a couple of times a day, whatever that is, that's for 1 hour, 20 minutes, even if it's just for 15 minutes. Do you have that time to think? And if you do that consistently, that builds a habit of thinking. And you will notice, so when people start to do like this bigger vision and planning and stuff, they'll notice that they will struggle to do like 1 year out or 6 months out or 2 years out. Past that, they can't think. Now, I know people who plan 20 years out. I personally do it more 10 years out. But that didn't just come to me naturally. I had to train my mind to keep thinking outwards. It's a lot like training a muscle. And so whatever you do, it's going to be hard in the beginning when it comes to these things. It doesn't mean that you're not capable of it. It's like when you haven't read for a while, you read 1 page a day. Over time, it just gets better and better and better. And a lot of people might start reading, it's like, oh, I'm a slow reader, or I don't read enough, or something like that. But no, you haven't trained your mind enough. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about training our mind. So habits are around your thinking. Habits are also around your emotions. Take a survey of how you feel. All you have to do is put some kind of timer 5 times a day. 5 times a day, and have a question on the timer. How do I feel right now? Or how do I feel in relation to what's happening in my life right now? Throughout the day, multiple times. You will notice that you have an emotional pattern. You might wake up with an emotional pattern in the morning. Maybe that's hopeless. Maybe that's disconnected. Or maybe that's excited. I don't know. And then you go through the day, the first part of the day, you're getting frustrated, and your habit is frustrated every day. Now, when you're keeping that up, guess what? That habit has consequences. So unless you're aware of what those patterns are, you don't know how to deal with it. So we're setting up habits around thinking, emotions, and then behavior. So a lot of people understand behavior is that when you do something often, it will get ingrained in your system, but that's also related to thinking and emotions too. So behavior is very interesting because you either hear one extreme or the other extreme. So there are people who are not disciplined at all, and then there are people who will say, like, do not miss anything. If that clock ringer goes off, you need to wake up. Otherwise, you're a piece of crap. Okay. And then some people have no habits whatsoever. They have automatic habits. So which one do you listen to? It's actually not the extremes. It's somewhere in the middle that makes it. How can you develop habits without crapping on yourself, without shitting on yourself? How can you do it in a kinder way? Which means that you need to do things that aligns with your long-term vision, with your purpose, with your long-term process, and the focus is to get better. The focus is to get better. And some key things around that I want to share is that a few things that can help you get better in terms of your habits. One, if you don't have this already, if you're in an age of technology, I mean, you are in the age of technology. If you are working on a computer, if you don't have a calendar system, get it. So the first one is a calendar system. And calendar can work as a tracking system as well, but you can also have tracking systems for habits, different habits. For example, you can have a spreadsheet for, hey, this is the workout I did for 20 minutes. I read for 20 minutes here or 15 minutes here. Every time you do that, you put it on an Excel sheet or some kind of tracking system. The calendar system helps you understand what's happening in your day. The way I describe that is that your calendar system is the snapshot of your life. So whatever is important to you, it needs to go on your calendar. And then the tracking helps you understand that you're looking at data. You're not just emotionally reacting to what's happening. So you might, for example, you go to the end of the week, oh, I didn't work out enough. Or you say to yourself, oh, I worked out a lot. But when you go to the sheet, you've only worked out 3 times a week. So you have a better view on what's actually happening. That's just in terms of a workout. Or let's say if you're an investor, well, I was supposed to reach out to 3 brokers, but you reached out to 1. You're just gathering data. It doesn't mean you be hard on yourself. Or if you're in sales, you might say, I'm reaching out to this many prospects this week. And you had 20, you ended up reaching out to 15, or maybe you reached out to 25, but you're tracking that. And this helps you strategically start to gather data. And then the next step in that same area is review and feedback. This is really important. So review and feedback looks like this. Most people, what they do is when they kind of break a habit. So for example, they work out 3 times 3 days, and then the 4th day they didn't wake up on time. They'd be like, oh, I'm a piece of crap. I can't even continue a simple. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is by the end of the week, we get to the end of the week, we ask ourselves, okay, what worked? What didn't work? What can I improve? 3 questions. What worked? What didn't work? What can I improve? If you can just ask yourself, no matter, even if it's positive outcome or negative outcome, if you can ask yourself that, it can completely transform how you look at yourself. You'll be much kinder. You're only reviewing and improving the process. So you're only growing. You're not crapping on yourself. And then the last part of that is accountability. This is something a lot of people don't realize, that as human beings, we're a social species. You're much more likely to do something if you're accountable to others. Now, it doesn't mean that, because you have self-accountability as well. And ideally, you want to develop so much integrity that you don't really need that much accountability from others, but most of us need it, including me. I have some level of self-accountability for myself, but a lot of things that I do because, well, my family needs it. My team needs it. My clients need it. I'm accountable to quite a few people. Maybe it's not an employer, but I'm accountable to the people in my life. My community needs it. And because they're all part of my vision, I feel good that I'm accountable to somebody. So it's not an obligation. I want to be accountable in a positive way. So if I have a session with you, I want to show up there. I'm accountable to that. If I'm saying that I'm going to send something to you, that's being accountable. That's a positive thing. So who are your accountability partners? Who are in your life? It could be your coach. It could be your peers. It could be your spouse, whoever. Having that can really help with your habits. So those 4 areas in terms of habits will help. So boiling down all of it, let me see if I missed something. I think that's it. So boiling down all of this is that you need these 3 areas for you to strategically approach your life. You need vision, you need planning, you need habits. And before the next year begins, I highly recommend on vision, at least 2 hours, on planning, at least 2 hours, on setting up all your habits and setting up some kind of tracking system for how you're building these habits, at least an hour for that. So in total, even if you can spend 5 hours over the next month developing this stuff, you will be ahead of well over 90% of the people in the world, because most people don't do this. They might say that they do it, but they don't consistently do it. And then your day-to-day, week-to-week life looks like that you're following through with all that stuff and you're tracking it every week. You're journaling about it. And that might be one of the tools, or you're looking at your timesheet, or you're looking at your calendar system. If you can do these things consistently over the long run, you will surprise yourself, because all you'll be doing is you've already set up your plans. You're going to wake up and you follow through with your own plan. You might fall off course sometimes, and sometimes you won't. But over the course of time, if you count, let's say 365 days, maybe out of 365 days, you were consistent 250 days. That's really good. That's awesome. Can you improve that next year? Of course you can. Maybe you stuck to it half the time. That's still really good.